Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jody, and on my channel I talk about Broadway and books. And in today's video, I'll be continuing my Broadway show series where I talk about every Broadway show I've ever seen. So normally in this series on my channel, I go over a few things, such as who was in the cast in my performance, who was on the creative team, how I like the show, anything interesting in the playbill. Today's video will be a little bit different, as today's show that I'm going to be talking about is a show I've talked about in this series already. So instead of going over the things I normally go over, I'll go over briefly who was in the cast, because there was a cast change at this point in the show. I'll briefly go over how I like the show in case you missed me talking about, how I like this show the first time around, and I'll briefly go over what is in the playbill. And so, yeah, without any further ado, let's get on to today's show. So today I'll be talking about the 33rd Broadway show I ever got to see, which was my second time seeing the smash Broadway hit Hairspray. So I did end up seeing Hairspray a total of 5 times on Broadway before the show closed. Today I'll just be talking about my second time seeing the show, which, like I said, was my 33rd Broadway show. So I saw this show for the second time in May of 2003 at the Neil Simon Theater. So now I'll get on into what is in the playbill. So here's the page that has the headshots of the leading and supporting performers who were in the show in May of 2003. And then the page with the chorus, standbys, and understudies would be here. Okay, so now this is usually the point of the video where I'll go over who was in the cast, point out any names I may recognize from having seen them at other Broadway shows since I saw them in Hairspray. The thing is, I'm just going to be talking about one performer because as of now, at this point in Hairspray had started previews in July of 2002, which was around the first time I saw the show, and then it officially opened probably in August of 2002. So the show hadn't yet been open on Broadway for a year. Also, the Tony Awards were kind of just around the corner. So most of the cast at this point was the same as the first time I had seen the show. The only person I was definitely aware of that had left the show at this point was Jen Gambaptiste. So she was in the chorus at this point. She was, I think, understudy for Carrie Butler as well as for Penny. She left the show sometime between my first time and second time seeing it because she went to join the Broadway show A Year with Frog and Toad. So somebody replaced Jen Gambaptiste in the show. And I think perhaps, I'm not positive, but the only person when I looked in the playbill that I didn't recognize from my first time looking in the playbill was Ali Mozzie, who, this was actually her Broadway debut, so it's super cool to know I got to see her in her Broadway debut. But yeah, she's done a lot of Broadway shows since Hairspray. I saw her in Cry Baby on Broadway, and I feel like I've seen her in other Broadway shows. I know she did Wicked on Broadway at some point, and I believe she's still in Kimberly Akimbo, which is still currently on Broadway, which is closing, I believe, April 30th of this year. So if you haven't seen it and you didn't know it was closing, you still have some time to see it. But yeah, she's just in, I'll get to this point when I get to it, but she was really great in Cry Baby. But yeah, she's the only person I noticed that was, I didn't notice the first time I saw the show, so most likely she was the one that replaced Jen Gambaptiste, who is an amazing Broadway performer. Okay, I'll get on now to how I like the show briefly, because like I said, I talked about this more in depth the first time I talked about Hairspray, and my feelings towards the show had not changed. I absolutely loved Hairspray. It was one of the best shows I had ever seen on Broadway. It's just such a great, lively, fun, energetic, beautiful show, and it's no longer playing in New York, but I'm sure there's a tour out there somewhere, and I'm sure their productions being put on of Hairspray all across the country, more likely. And if you ever get the chance to see Hairspray live on stage, I highly recommend it because it's such a great show, and it's just such a good time. And I can't say enough great things about the show. I love it so much. Clearly, I saw it a few times. So I'll be talking about the show again 3 more times in this series, so stay tuned for that. And now, as far as anything interesting in the playbill, if you watched my last video in this series, where I talked about my 32nd Broadway show, which was my first time seeing the producers. My playbill for that show, even though I saw the show at the end of April, my playbill said May of 2003, and that's when I saw this show. So the playbills, what's inside, is the same because it's a monthly thing. Everything in the playbill is the same. I will point out a few things because the next show I'll be talking about, they have a whole article in here about that. So in case you did miss my last video, you know, a little sneak preview of what I'm going to be talking about next. Oh, I'll show the month and the year first, May of 2003. And then the next show I'm actually going to be talking about was when I saw the Broadway revival of Gypsy starring Bernadette Peters, and there's an article in here about that show. And I'll still show the listing where it says Gypsy, but yeah, that's the next show I'll be talking about. Yeah, next show, like I said, my 34th Broadway show was the Broadway revival of Gypsy starring Bernadette Peters, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And yeah, this was a quick short video because, like I said, I talked about this series, talked about this show in the series already. So if you're curious more of my thoughts on, you know, more on how I like the show, be sure to check out, you know, that video where I talked about the show for the first time. It was my, what number was it? It was my 30, I forget what number it was. I'm losing track at this point, but I have a playlist on my channel of all the Broadway shows I talked about, so it's in there if you're curious. Probably rambled a little more than I had to, but you know what? I love talking about Hairspray. What can I say? So if you made it to this point of the video, thank you so very much for watching me or listening to me talk about my 33rd Broadway show I ever got to see, which was my second time seeing the Broadway smash hit Hairspray. So like I said, be sure to stay tuned for my next video in this series where I talk about my 34th Broadway show, which was the Broadway revival of Gypsy starring Bernadette Peters. So as always, thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, bye!